Welcome to Becoming More Me, the podcast for busy-minded entrepreneurs that want to be more and do less. These episodes are here to inspire you to become more of the person you feel called to be in this world and to let it be easy. I'm your host, Teresa Lear-Levine. I'm an EFT master practitioner, hypnotherapist, and international best-selling author of Becoming More Me, Tapping into Success, Subconscious Secrets of an ADHD Entrepreneurial Mom. Helping you to get out of your own way, shed light on your shadows, be more and do less, and call your power back so that you can make the never-ending journey of becoming one you can truly enjoy getting present for is my jam. I gotta ask, have you ever felt like your drive for success is simultaneously fueling a silent battle with anxiety, self-doubt, and burnout? What if I told you there's a way to achieve your ambitions while nurturing inner calm and confidence? My guest today, Tati Garcia, is a licensed clinical counselor and coach specializing in high-functioning anxiety. She's the host of the podcast Calmly Coping, and she has more than 13 years of experience in the field of mental health. Her passion lies in guiding ambitious achievers to overcome anxiety, self-doubt, and burnout so they can feel calmer and more confident from within. Tati has thousands of hours of experience helping clients and uses evidence-based approaches including mindfulness, self-compassion, and positive psychology to help high achievers make improvements in their mindset, self-care, and work-life balance. Join us today as Tati Garcia shares her expert insights on transforming high-functioning anxiety into a source of strength. Welcome, Tati. I'm so glad you're here to talk with us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So the first thing I love to just kind of get into, aside from all the wonderful things that you do professionally, I'd love for you to share a little bit about who you are, where you live, who the important people in your life are, what you like to do for hobbies or interests, that kind of thing.
Yes, that's a refreshing way to start the episode. Usually it's diving into the professional, but I appreciate that question. So I live in New Jersey. I've lived here my whole life. Um, I I guess that you mentioned the important people in my life. So I live with my boyfriend and, all of my family and friends are nearby, which is great
Nice.
because you hear about people who will move across the country and although I admire that, I can't ever imagine like leaving the people that are
Yeah.
closest to me, leaving my loved ones because they're very important to me. And personally, I just enjoy nature. I love the outdoors. When I was in college, I joined the outdoors club. And so I love things like hiking and rock climbing and kayaking and camping and backpacking, all the stuff.
Nice.
I don't get to do it nearly as often as I would like to,
Mhm.
but I love that. And I love reading and learning and just learning new things is something that's really fulfilling for me. And I feel like I can never learn enough or satiate that
Oh,
need.
yes, I'm a voracious learner and reader too. I
Mhm.
love all of that. And I am sure, with all the work that you do with anxiety, you can relate to like all that getting outdoors being so helpful for like grounding you and helping with that. Is that like one of the things that you would recommend to people to do more of?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, awesome. So we talk a lot about high functioning anxiety, which I know is like a really big focus of your work on this show. And because I personally have battled with it in my life, and I know a lot of the people that listen to the show do too. And I feel like everyone explains it a little bit differently and has a little bit of a different perspective on it. So I'd love to hear your take on it. Can you explain how high functioning anxiety differs from other forms of anxiety? And perhaps some common symptoms people might experience?
Yeah. So the way that it differs really is in how it might present and how that person shows up in their day-to-day functioning. So that high functioning part is a clinical term to basically assess or determine that you're able to function well, get things done, take care of your responsibilities, take care of yourself in your day to day. And individuals with high functioning anxiety tend to be high achieving. They tend to appear successful and calm and ambitious to others on the outside and like they have it all together. However, that is contrasted by on the inside where they are struggling with anxiety, which can look like overthinking things, assuming the worst in situations, maybe having difficulty with making decisions, putting a lot of pressure on themselves, being really hard on themselves. And this can come from and is driven by like these behaviors by a fear. And fear is often of, can be different things for different people. It could be a fear of failure, a fear of uncertainty. So, this worry that if I don't stay busy or if I don't accomplish things, then that means that I'm a failure or that means that the ball is going to drop and everything's going to fall apart. And this these behaviors can often persist even in spite of the fact that it could be and is often negatively impacting the person. Maybe they're not respecting their own boundaries, they're not taking time to care for themselves or to recharge and take breaks. And so this can often look like a lack of work-life balance and can lead to a point of burnout if you're not respecting your needs. So those are a lot of the common signs. I think another one is a lack it can be a lack of confidence in yourself. So, struggling with self doubt or doubting your own abilities, and that can show up as imposter syndrome or feeling like you're not qualified or doubting that your competency when it comes to a certain ability or position or whatever it is that you're doing. So you don't necessarily have to be somebody who is a working professional. That's who I tend to focus on helping, but it could be just if you resonate with having those traits of being somebody who is doing well and high achieving in your day to day, but you feel like you're wearing this mask to cover up the anxiety, the turmoil that's going on within.
Yeah, great explanation. Thank you for that. And I know from having been on your show and getting to know you a bit that this is something that you're no stranger to. So I would like you to share a little bit about your own like story about high functioning anxiety and like what led you to specialize in this.
Yeah, so I didn't even know that high functioning anxiety was a thing until about 4 years ago at this point. And I knew, of course, how I felt. And I, in hindsight, had been struggling with anxiety pretty much my entire life, but didn't realize it until I was in college and I started studying psychology. And actually, at that point, started to experience panic attacks and really strong anxiety and had to go to the college therapist and get more support with that. And I realized that this anxiety kind of followed me, but just showed up in different ways throughout my life. When I was younger, especially, it was a lot of social anxiety and worrying about what other people would think about me or fearing judgment from other people. And then as I got into my career and started to practice full time as a therapist, I realized that there was this fear or worry that I wasn't doing a good enough job or that, that imposter syndrome and putting a lot of pressure on myself and always wanting to function at like 200% and do everything that I could do and feeling like, well, at least if I met these insurmountable or, kind of unrealistic expectations, then at least I would be doing everything in my control. And it reached a point where I kind of, was moving up the ladder. So I started as a clinician or therapist at an agency and then was promoted to a management position. And this was something that I didn't realize it until I was in it for a little bit, but it was really stressful and really challenging for me. And along with my high expectations, I was also feeling really overwhelmed and feeling like I was kind of burning the candle at both ends. And this led to me reaching a point of burnout where I remember this moment clearly where I was driving my car home and from work that day, and I got a call that there was an issue at work. It wasn't even anything monumental, but I think it was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. And I just remember kind of like breaking down, crying, getting really angry, and like being behind the wheel of a car was not a good place to be. I felt like I couldn't control myself. I was just so at this breaking point. And
Yeah.
then when I got home, I was this isn't okay. Like it's not okay that a job is getting me to this point and something has to change. And that was really, I had already been starting to build a private practice on the side. And I was actually going to continue working though for a while longer. But that was the catalyst that got me to put in my notice and just go straight into my private practice full time. And through that process, I was met with a new set of struggles being self employed, building a
Yeah.
business. And that was when I realized just, I think, I don't even remember where I saw it initially. I feel like a lot of people see it in like a graphic online, like these are the signs of high functioning anxiety or something like that. And that was when I realized that, oh, this is me. This really resonates with me. And that was when I went through the process of just taking my background as a therapist and, you know, educating myself and um, basically using those techniques to help myself and to heal myself, and then experimenting with and creating a process to help others going through the same and similar struggles so that they could heal from those things that I was struggling with that
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people can relate to.
Mm, beautiful. And you highlighted some of the ways that when we have high functioning anxiety, we can be so hard on ourselves. And there's that the self doubt and the perfectionism, and that really kind of pushes out our ability to be compassionate with ourselves. So, how did you and how do you like to help others to navigate those kind of challenges and cultivate that self compassion?
Yeah, that's an excellent point that self-compassion is so important. So through my process of healing, I actually took a mindful self-compassion course. It was like an 8-week program through a local college. And I found that this was really powerful in just learning the foundations of self-compassion. It's something that is well studied and researched. And it's the simple way that I teach my clients and students and listeners to practice self-compassion is just it's the act of being kind to yourself, of supporting yourself like you would to a friend. I was just speaking to a client earlier today about that, that one of the pieces of self-compassion is that mindfulness component. It's just the acknowledgement of where you are and just validating your present moment experience. That if you're in a place where you're feeling overwhelmed or you're feeling really anxious or struggling, to validate that this is tough and that's okay. And at the same time, it doesn't have to be this way forever. And we think that we have to be hard on ourselves to get things done and to accomplish things, and we need to have discipline, and discipline's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it's where it's coming from. If you're coming from a place of being really mean and harsh and beating yourself up when you don't reach your often unrealistic goals, especially if you're somebody who is ambitious and a perfectionist,
Yeah.
then that's not going to help you reach those goals any more quickly. And it's often just going to make you feel worse about yourself.
Absolutely. You mentioned when you were talking about your story about either being close to or feeling like you were in like a phase of burnout. And I feel like burnout is one of those like kind of buzzwords that people use, like if they had a rough week or whatever else, they throw it around like, burnout. But burnout is a really serious condition and it happens so much more often than ever these days. So, could you maybe define that a little bit better and help us understand the signs and symptoms of burnout and why high achievers are more likely to struggle with it?
Yeah. So burnout is basically a state of emotional, physical, psychological exhaustion. It's where you've reached the point where you feel like you have nothing left to give. And it can show up in different ways. It can look like physical exhaustion. It can look like just emotionally that you have less of a capacity to be a support for others. You might be more irritable or frustrated as a result of maybe having responsibilities put on you, or if people ask you for support, or even just in your day-to-day roles. It can also look like cynicism and feeling resentful towards people in your life, or feeling really negative and critical of your job, or feeling like you don't have support and feeling like you're kind of stuck and
Yeah.
in a hole in a way. And
Yeah.
it can also show up as symptoms of anxiety and depression. So it could look like, you know, overthinking things, feeling on edge, nervousness, worrying, physical symptoms like rapid heart rate or tension in your body or shortness of breath or feeling a lack of hopefulness about the future, and feeling down about yourself. So there are a lot of different ways that burnout can show up, and it can look different for different people.
Right.
However, it's essentially just this point where I like to explain it as you've been giving more to others than you have been either giving to yourself or receiving. Because sometimes burnout can come from not feeling supported, whether
Sure.
that is in your workplace or at home. And also, just like I said, not supporting yourself.
Yeah. And when we get into being cynical and everything else, we disconnect even more. Because I'm looking at it like from an energetic perspective instead of a clinical perspective. I feel like it has a lot to do with being disconnected from that source energy of what we truly are, and having that disconnect there. So I appreciate that description there. So, you talked about the self-compassion and cultivating that. And I feel like self-compassion is ultimately a form of self-care. It should be a more obvious form of that, in that we would treat other people like that easily. And we have such a hard time giving ourselves that treatment like we would a friend. And I think that a lot of times high achievers can end up feeling guilty for giving to themselves in that way, even though they shouldn't. I hate to say the word should, but um, how can we kind of get over that guilt and pour into our cup more easily?
Yeah, that's a big question because I think that guilt can be really hardwired. It's something that we are often it's modeled either growing up, and it can look like generations of self-sacrifice,
Yeah.
of just seeing whether it is a parent or caregiver or even a boss if it's in the workplace, just having those habits of giving more and being selfless, which is not in and of itself a bad thing, but feeling like that is the only option and that it's wrong to take care of yourself. So I think that just culturally it's something that we have to intentionally move away from, this belief that taking care of ourselves is selfish or wrong,
Yeah.
because ultimately guilt is an emotion that is telling you that, okay, I've done something that is wrong and I need to change that behavior. However, guilt isn't necessarily, when you're looking at it from the perspective of taking care of yourself, or a lot of my clients come to me feeling guilty, relaxing, or taking time off of work. If you look at it through that lens of guilt being that you're doing something wrong, is it really wrong that you are taking care of yourself? And how is that wrong? Like, what makes that wrong? I like to look at it as the process of really kind of dissecting these beliefs that we hold, that we
Yeah.
just assume that they're true. But if you even just go in one layer down and question it, is that something that is really accurate? And
Right.
is that something that's helping you? So how is it helping you to beat yourself up when you take time for yourself? Or is that just making you feel more anxious and more down on yourself.
Yeah, taking time to question our beliefs is definitely important, especially since you mentioned that so many of them didn't even come from us in the first place. And, when they're coming from generations before us and they're just very subconscious and just kind of pervasive, and we've just accepted them like they're the truth or they're fact when really they're not even who we are. So I think
Mhm.
for anybody who has never questioned their beliefs, take a little time and think about that because sometimes we're thinking beliefs are facts, but when you can start calling them out as beliefs and realizing that they're changeable, there's so much room for things to be different in your life. So what do you think are like the three main like pillars to managing and overcoming this high functioning anxiety as a whole?
Yeah. So my approach to managing high functioning anxiety is through those three pillars of I call it calm, balance, and confidence. And what got me to identify this approach, and it's something that has been proven in working with my clients and students that has provided them with success in healing from high functioning anxiety. That first pillar is calm because you need to focus on managing your emotions, understanding more about your mindset. And so within that calm pillar, it's your emotional and mental awareness and healing, essentially, reframing some of those negative thoughts that lead to anxiety, such
Yeah.
as assuming the worst case or assuming that other people are thinking about you negatively or that things are going to go terribly. And so that is a addressing that first pillar is going to help you to feel and take care of that foundation of feeling more safe and stable. And then that will allow you to address the second, which is balance. Because I mentioned that individuals with high functioning anxiety tend to struggle with work life balance, tend to struggle with putting a lot of pressure on themselves and getting into a state of burnout. When you can understand how to manage your energy, assess your priorities, because when you're somebody who is ambitious, you probably want to do it all. You want to do it all and get it all done at 150%. However, that's not always realistic. So
Yeah.
putting things into perspective and also setting boundaries when it comes to your time, your energy, and what your focus is that second pillar of balance. And then the third is confidence. And so that is connecting to those struggles with self doubt and even self trust. A lot of anxiety can come from not trusting ourselves, whether it's not trusting our ability to make decisions or not trusting that we'll be able to handle certain difficult situations. And so when you can work on building your self trust, your self worth, even just that feeling of feeling good enough and
Yeah.
supporting yourself. This is where I like to bring in that self compassion, supporting yourself in that way, like you would a friend. That can really help to address all those struggles that are present within individuals with high functioning anxiety.
Yeah, that's great. And, you mentioned both balance and priorities, and I always feel like they require more discussion because I personally feel like balance is a little bit of a myth. Like our expectation of what we can actually get out of our life in a balanced way. And I think most people feel like there should be, work, and there should be life, and it should all just kind of like sit evenly on this imaginary scale or whatever. And it really can't. Like there's no equalization when you're giving your attention to where you're giving your attention. And I think the same thing happens with priorities, which has only been a plural word for the last 100 and some years, and we want to give our utmost attention and focus to so many different things, which is also impossible. And I think a lot of that is creation of high functioning anxiety people who want to do more and do it all and prioritize it all and try to get it all to balance when it just can't. So that probably leads to a lot of the overthinking and the self-doubt that come up. So how
Yeah.
can how can high achievers break free from the overthinking and the self-doubt?
Yeah. And when you describe the balance, the prioritization when it comes to those things, I think it's about having flexibility and
Yes.
mental flexibility and recognizing that perfection does not exist And even though we may consciously know this, sometimes we can still put those expectations upon ourselves or believe that other people expect that from us. So part of that first step is just awareness and catching yourself. And so when
Mhm.
that is you're overthinking things or you're in moments of self-doubt, because the natural tendency is to see these thoughts as facts and to believe that they're true and then go down the rabbit hole of the what ifs or
Yeah.
the worst case scenarios, or if you're up at 2 a.m. thinking of like these terrible consequences or things that could happen. So the most difficult and the most necessary part is just catching yourself, whether it's in the moment. And that gives you the chance to pause and take a step back from those thoughts and stop yourself from feeding the cycle. And also recognizing that when it comes to balance, I like to look at it as less so of a perfect scale of, things being equal and more so analogous to the concept of homeostasis, which is
Mhm.
just the process that occurs within our bodies that allows us to regulate our functioning. So for example, maintaining a certain body temperature is a way that our bodies naturally maintain homeostasis and to keep us within a certain range. So you can look at balance in the same way that, okay, maybe there's times where, to go with that same example, we may have a fever, but our body does things in order to bring the temperature down, maybe,
Yeah.
shivering or wanting to get warm or whatever it is. So when it comes to balance, you may have periods where you're going hard, working harder, pushing yourself, or focusing more on one thing, but being sure to balance that with a period of recovery. And it could look like longer term periods of balance where you're having phases or seasons of life where things are you're pushing more and
Right.
taking rest and recovery. It could also look like smaller phases where even within a day you're taking time to do work and then taking 5 to 10 minute break to recharge. So
Right.
it's all about, when it comes to the overthinking, the self-doubt, the balance, I think the big underlying thing is listening to yourself and taking those moments to connect with and build that muscle of understanding your needs. And that can be a process because, especially when it comes to anxiety, a lot of times when we try and listen to ourselves, it can be inaccurate. So, kind of going under the layer of the fear based thoughts and getting to what is it that you actually need.
Yeah. What do you feel like is actually at the root of high functioning anxiety for most people?
So, I think that to put it simply, it's fear because that's the root of anxiety, whether and it's going to look different for different people. So
Sure.
whether that is the fear of failure, like I mentioned before, a lot of the time it's just the fear of uncertainty. I like to say that uncertainty is a breeding ground for anxiety. And especially if you're somebody, let's say, who did well in school growing up and you had that certainty of, okay, if I put the time in, then I'm going to get a good grade.
Yeah.
And obviously, that does not translate into real life. When you go and get a job, you can put work in, and that may not necessarily translate to a good grade or good results, or you may get no or minimal feedback at all. And so, just dealing with that lack of certainty or that lack of information can make it more likely that you're in a place of worrying or wondering or assuming the worst. So,
Yeah.
could be a fear of judgment from others, a fear of what other
Sure.
people will think,
I tend to see a
or
lot of like not enoughness.
yeah, absolutely. That's a big one. The fear of what if I'm not good enough? What if there's something wrong with me? What if I'm flawed in some way? That's definitely something that is really pervasive and leads to pushing yourself more and trying to look for external validation to fill this internal hole
Right.
of feeling like you're not enough.
Yeah. And it validates those thoughts in our head that tell us we can't slow down or we can't do less and be more, or we have to do more because otherwise we won't be noticed, appreciated, understood, whatever the case may be. So I see that a lot in people that have it. But all of those things
Yeah.
definitely can translate to high functioning anxiety. So we have the high achievers, we have the anxiety. What is one like mindset shift that would really benefit anyone that's dealing with this?
So I think a helpful mindset shift is, and it's going to be counterintuitive, but I will often tell people to lower their expectations because the way that I like to describe it is that there's a certain amount of pressure or stress that we need to put on ourselves to get things done. And what individuals with high functioning anxiety will do will be they often go beyond that. So there is just kind of like this excess level of pressure and
Mm,
often driven by this place of fear or what ifs. And that's not helping you to get things done anymore. It's often just many times it can hold you back in
yeah.
procrastination or self-sabotage or make you feel more anxious leading up to things, or if it's like an important meeting you have or something similar. So if you can lower your expectations and even just mentally let yourself know that I'm, I can't think of a specific example, but just allowing yourself to, rather than aiming for perfection, aiming for, I'm going to do the best that I can in this moment. And that's all that I can do, rather than trying to accomplish all the things. I think that can sometimes be a helpful mindset shift, especially if you find yourself in this place of just automatically putting a lot of pressure on yourself without even realizing it.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great one. Thank you for that. So, who are the types of people that you tend to work with, and how do you work with people?
So I tend to work with ambitious professionals who are basically everything that I described, struggling with high
Everything we just
functioning
talked about.
anxiety. Yeah. And I work through clients locally that live in the state of New Jersey through psychotherapy. I work with clients globally through coaching and help them and guide them through that calm, balanced, and confident process that I described.
Hmm.
I work with both men and women, anybody from any background, any age, as long as you're an adult. And I also I have online courses on high functioning anxiety, perfectionism, and I have a community with individuals with high functioning anxiety where we have monthly coaching calls, workshops, trainings, presentations, and a support forum where you can get guidance and support from other individuals in a similar place as you. And we can also help to hold each other accountable.
Awesome. So, if people want to learn about any of these things, where can they go?
So my website is becalmwithtati.com. You can also find me on Instagram at TatianaGLPC, and I have a free Facebook community for high functioning anxiety called Calmly Coping. It's the same name as my podcast. I also have a podcast called Calmly Coping.
Awesome. Thank you. I will make sure all of that is in the show notes. Are there any final thoughts or words of wisdom that you have to share before we wrap things up?
I think one thing that I often like to share is if you're in this place of feeling this way, just know that you're not alone and you don't have to feel this way forever. And even if you're able to take small baby steps in becoming more aware, learning more about yourself, being kinder to yourself, that is going to result in long-term progress over the long run.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Tati. I really appreciate everything that you shared with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I had a joy.
Oh, good. And thank you all for listening. I know there are so many choices when it comes to the podcasts you choose to listen to. So thank you for choosing Becoming More Me. Thanks for spending some of your precious time with me today. If you loved this episode, please leave a review or simply share it with someone else who would get great benefit from it too. If you share on social media, please tag me so I can personally connect and thank you. Until next time, keep taking bold and brave steps towards becoming more of who you want to be in this world. You are capable, you are worthy, and you are enough. And if your inner critic is still trying to argue with those facts, hit me up. We've got work to do.